The sleek black SUV glided smoothly down a quiet suburban road, its engine barely making a sound. Inside, Monica Hayes, a 48-year-old black woman with a commanding presence, leaned back in her seat, savoring the calm after a long day. Monica wasn't just any professional, she was the director of the FBI, one of the most powerful positions in American law enforcement. Yet tonight, her mind wasn't on high-stakes cases or national security. All she wanted was to get home, enjoy a quiet dinner, and lose herself in a good book. The road was nearly empty, with only a handful of cars sharing the space. Monica's headlights illuminated the asphalt ahead, the silence broken only by the rhythmic hum of the tires. Then, in the rearview mirror, a sudden flash of red and blue lights pulled her out of her thoughts. The unmistakable sound of a police siren followed, signaling her to pull over. Monica frowned, a mix of confusion and irritation creeping onto her face. She hadn't broken any traffic laws, her speed was well within the limit, and she hadn't missed a single sign. Still, she dutifully steered her car to the side of the road and came to a stop. As she rolled down her window, a tall white man in his early 30s approached her car. His uniform was crisp, his badge reflecting the dim glow of the streetlights. His name tag read Jason Miller, and his expression was one of irritation bordering on hostility. Without offering a greeting, Jason leaned down, his eyes scanning Monica and her vehicle. "You were stopped for security reasons," he said coldly, his tone dismissive. Monica straightened in her seat, her calm demeanor masking the annoyance simmering beneath. "Security reasons?" she asked, her voice measured. "Is there a problem with me or my vehicle?" Jason didn't answer her question. Instead, he barked, "Show me your vehicle registration and driver's license." Monica hesitated for a moment before complying. She opened her glove compartment, retrieved the requested documents, and handed them over. Jason barely glanced at them before turning on his heel and heading back to his patrol car. Sitting alone in the silence, Monica's thoughts raced. This wasn't the first time she had been treated unfairly because of her skin color. Even in her high-ranking position, she had spent her entire career breaking barriers and proving doubters wrong. But moments like these still carried a sting. Jason returned after a few minutes, holding her documents loosely in one hand. "I need you to show me your ID," he demanded, his tone sharper now. Monica raised an eyebrow. "My car registration and driver's license are valid. I've done nothing wrong. Why are you asking for my ID?" Jason crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. "You have a suspicious attitude," he said. "A car like this, someone like you, doesn't add up." Monica felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her composure. "Suspicious attitude? What exactly are you basing that on?" Jason shrugged, his gaze flicking dismissively over Monica's simple yet elegant jacket. "Nothing special," he muttered. "But I'm in charge here. If you don't hand over your ID, I have every right to take you to the station." Monica's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She forced herself to remain calm, her voice steady. "Officer, your request is illegal. I've provided all the necessary documents required by law. Unless you have a valid reason, I won't present additional identification." Jason's eyes narrowed, and his smirk turned into a sneer. "Don't tell me how to do my job, ma'am. People like you shouldn't have Victor Gage authority." Monica froze momentarily at his words, the insult cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. Slowly, she met his gaze. "I'm not Che Victor Gage your authority," she said, her voice firm. "I'm asking you to exercise it properly. What you're doing right now is an abuse of power, and it could get you into serious trouble." Jason leaned closer, his voice dripping with contempt. "Trouble? You don't scare me. Who do you think you are to talk to me like that?" Monica's eyes didn't waver. "Someone who knows the law better than you do," she replied calmly. The situation was quickly spiraling out of control. Jason, standing with his arms crossed, took a step closer to her car window. His posture radiated hostility. "I'll tell you this one more time," he growled. "Show me your ID or I'll have no choice but to detain you." Monica took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm. "Officer Miller," she began, her voice measured, "I've already provided all legally required documents. Your demand for my ID is not only unnecessary, it's unlawful. If you insist on continuing this, you'll be held accountable." Jason's expression darkened, the idea of being Chief Victor Gage clearly intolerable to him. "Accountable?" he scoffed, leaning down so his face was inches from hers. "You've got some nerve. You think you're above the rules, don't you?" Monica's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. I don't think I'm above the rules, but I know the rules and right now you're breaking them. Her calm rebuttal only seemed to fuel Jason's frustration. He straightened up, running a hand over the belt holding his holstered gun, a deliberate show of power. You're walking a thin line here, lady, he sneered. I don't have time to argue with someone like you. If you don't cooperate, I won't hesitate to use force. The threat hung heavily in the air. Monica glanced at Jason's hand resting near his weapon. The implicit danger clear, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Using force against someone who's done nothing wrong, she said, her voice unyielding. You're only proving my point. You're abusing your authority. Jason slammed his hand on the roof of her car, his patience clearly frayed. Do you know who you're talking to? He barked. I'm the law here. You're just another stop driver. If you don't comply, I'll make sure you regret it. Monica's eyes didn't waver. You might want to rethink that, she said evenly. This isn't just about me. Your actions tonight could ruin your career. Jason laughed, a bitter, mocking sound. My career? You really think I care about what you have to say? His hand moved closer to his gun. This is your last warning. Monica's S quickened, but her exterior remained calm. She knew this wasn't just about defending herself, it was about standing up to systemic abuse and injustice. Slowly, she reached for her phone, holding it up where Jason could see it. What are you doing? Jason demanded, his tone tinged with suspicion. Monica pressed a number on speed dial and lifted the phone to her ear. Calling someone who outranks you, she said simply. The line connected, and Monica's saved voice was calm but commanding. This is Monica Hayes, she said. I'm being detained unlawfully by a police officer. I need the sheriff's presence immediately. Jason's eyes widened, his confidence faltering. Who are you calling? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. Monica didn't answer him directly. Instead, she relayed her location to the person on the other end of the line. Thank you, she said before ending the call. Looking back at Jason, she said firmly. The sheriff will be here shortly. I suggest you think very carefully about your next move. Jason's bravado was beginning to crumble. Though his hand lingered near his weapon, the gun itself stayed holstered, his face flushed with anger and uncertainty. This isn't over, he muttered, but the cracks in his resolve were clear. The flashing red and blue lights of an approaching vehicle pierced the night, growing brighter as the sheriff's SUV pulled up to the roadside. Monica remained motionless in her car, her expression calm yet resolute. Sheriff Victor Cruz, a middle-aged Latino man with a commanding presence, stepped out. His tall frame and weathered face reflected decades of experience in law enforcement. Without hesitation, he strode toward Jason, his sharp gaze assessing the situation. Miller, Cruz called out, his voice firm but tinged with disbelief. What the hell is going on here? Jason turned to face his superior, his shoulders stiffening. Sir, he began, his voice uneven. This woman refused to cooperate. She wouldn't show me her ID, and she's being. Lower your tone and holster your weapon. Cruz interrupted, his tone cutting. His eyes moved to Monica, who remained composed but watchful. Cruz noticed the tension in her posture, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. Are you pointing a gun at an unarmed civilian? Jason hesitated, then slowly stepped back, his hand falling away from his holster. I was just doing my job, he muttered defensively. Cruz narrowed his eyes. Your job doesn't include intimidating citizens or abusing your authority, he said sharply. Now step aside. Jason grudgingly moved away from Monica's car, his face pale with a mixture of anger and uncertainty. Cruz approached Monica, his demeanor softening slightly. Ma'am, he said, his voice calm. Are you all right? Monica nodded, her tone measured as she replied. I'm fine, Sheriff. But this officer's actions were not only inappropriate, they were unlawful. Cruz studied her face for a moment before something shifted in his expression. Recognition dawned in his eyes. Director Hayes, he said quietly, almost in disbelief. Jason froze, the color draining from his face. Director? He repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Monica's gaze didn't waver as she confirmed. Yes. Monica Hayes, director of the FBI. For a moment, silence blanketed the scene. Jason's mouth opened, then closed, as though he were struggling to process the revelation. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the gravity of his actions began to sink in. Cruz turned to Jason, his face hardening. Do you have any idea what you've done? He demanded. You stopped and harassed the director of the FBI, without cause, pointed a weapon and violated her rights. This is beyond unacceptable. It's a disgrace. Jason stammered. Sir, I didn't know who she was. You were just abusing your authority, Monica interjected, her voice sharp but controlled. It doesn't matter who I am. Your behavior tonight is a clear example of systemic abuse and it has to stop. Cruz nodded, his jaw tight. Miller, he said, his voice cold, returned to the station. Write a full report about what happened here. I'll deal with you later. Jason hesitated, glancing between Cruz and Monica. No buts, Cruz snapped. Go, now. Jason finally relented, walking stiffly back to his patrol car. As he drove off, the tension in the air began to ease, though the weight of the incident lingered. Cruz turned back to Monica, his expression apologetic. Director Hayes, he said, his tone more respectful. I can't express how sorry I am for what happened tonight. This officer's behavior does not represent our department, and I will ensure he's held accountable. Monica's gaze remained steady. Thank you, Sheriff Cruz, she said, but this isn't just about me, it's about ensuring no one else has to endure what I just did. Cruz nodded, a flicker of shame crossing his face. You have my word, he said. We'll conduct a full investigation and take appropriate action. I'll make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug. Monica studied him for a moment, then nodded. I trust you'll do the right thing, she said, her voice firm. As Cruz assured her once more of his intentions, Monica knew the situation was far from over. She had stood her ground tonight, but the larger fight against systemic injustice and abuse of power was just beginning. She turned away from him, eyes scanning the quiet street now bathed in the harsh glow of streetlights. The chaos had dispersed, but an invisible residue clung to the silence of fear, anger, and something else, resolve. Cruz followed her gaze, hands resting heavily on his utility belt. If there's anything else I can do. There is, Monica interrupted gently, turning to face him again. I need access to the body cam footage. Not just from tonight, but from every incident Officer Miller has been involved in for the past 6 months. Cruz hesitated for a split second, just long enough for her to notice, then nodded. I'll authorize it first thing in the morning. Make it tonight, she said calmly, yet with steel behind her words. Delays cost lives, Sheriff. He swallowed hard and gave a curt nod. I'll call the station. As he stepped aside to make the call, Monica took a deep breath and pulled out her phone, typing a message rapidly. She wasn't going to wait for the department's internal process to run its course. She had contacts, federal, legal, journalistic, and if necessary, she'd bring this entire situation into the public eye. Because this wasn't about one rogue officer. It was about a culture, one that tolerated silence, rewarded intimidation, and expected people like her to back down. Not this time. A moment later, Cruz returned, slightly breathless. It's done. You'll have the footage within the hour. Good, Monica replied. And I expect full transparency moving forward. You'll have it. They stood in silence for a beat, the distance between them heavy with unspoken history, different lives, different choices, yet now standing on the same ground, bound by a moment that had cracked open something deeper. Then Monica turned to leave, heels clicking against the pavement, spine straight and unyielding. Cruz watched her walk away, a gnawing sense of unease settling in his chest. He knew what was coming: inquiries, scrutiny, headlines. And maybe that was exactly what this town needed. As Monica reached her car and opened the door, she paused, glancing back one last time. Not at Cruz, but at the station beyond the hills. A symbol of authority that had, for far too long, gone unchecked. She didn't smile, but her eyes burned with purpose. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Through this story, we not only witness a tense situation between a police officer and an innocent woman, but also see a much broader picture of power, prejudice, and courage. This is not just a story about a woman who dared to stand up for herself, but a symbol of the millions of people who silently endure injustice every single day. It reminds us that justice is not just words written on paper, it lives in concrete actions, in courageous voices, and in the moments when we dare to say no to what is wrong. Because power is a responsibility, not a tool to intimidate, and silence in the face of injustice only makes that injustice seem normal. In this year, 2025, we can start with ourselves, by changing the way we see others, teaching our children about equality and compassion, learning to listen rather than judge, and having the courage to speak up against wrong no matter how small. The simple actions we take today may become the foundation of a more civilized society tomorrow. Will racism still exist by 2030? Perhaps it will, because prejudice is not something that can be erased overnight. But I believe that if we continue to sow the seeds of the right values today, then at the very least, the next generation will grow up in a world that is fairer, more humane, and more respectful than the one we've known. And if enough people act together and awaken together, then what seems impossible today can become the norm of tomorrow. And what about you? What do you think about this story? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a similar act of injustice? If you were in this situation, would you choose silence or would you stand up? As for me, I believe true change doesn't need to start with the most powerful people. It begins with ordinary individuals who carry a heart that never stops fighting for truth and justice. Sometimes just a fair look, a timely word, or one determined action is enough to make a difference. And I hope that after hearing this story, each of us will have the courage to be that difference. Note, this story is entirely fictional, created for the purpose of raising awareness about important social issues. Our goal is to emphasize personal and collective responsibility, the spirit of justice, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect regardless of skin color, status, or life circumstances. We strongly oppose all forms of violence, discrimination, prejudice, and injustice in society. The elements in this story may be emotionally intense and are meant to be educational, encouraging viewers to reflect on moral values, fairness, and compassion. Viewer discretion is advised. If you feel that this content may be emotionally sensitive for you, please take a moment to consider before continuing. We hope this story contributes to positive discussions and inspires a more just, kind, and humane society.